any startup that I would want to join should be a startup that I would invest in. Because at the end of the day, when you join a startup, you're investing so much more than money uh, uh, into
Of
it.
course. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. I'm being joined today by Ori Yankelev, Chief Revenue Officer and founding team member of OwnBackup, where he leads the company's global go-to-market strategy. Based in Tel Aviv, Ori led the expansion of OwnBackup's global sales organization from one employee to what is today over 200 employees globally, with presence in the United States, UK, France, Israel, and Australia. Ori Yankelev, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Thank you for joining me from the OwnBackup offices. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, especially now I get to have another 20 minutes of inspiration, learn about some more things that I still know very little about, and hear from personal experiences. Ori, the Chief Revenue Officer and founding team member of OwnBackup, you're leading the company's global go-to-market strategy, but different from a lot of other companies here. You're actually running a team of 200 people that you helped scale from one person, globally, with presence in the US, UK, France, Israel, and Australia. And I'm excited to pick your brain, not just about sales and marketing, but what is it like growing really an entire organization within an organization that it deals both globally, deals with hundreds of employees, deals with changing strategies and culture, and so a lot of things to unfold here. But first, I'd like you to take me back your own journey and what brought you to be in a role where you decide that you're going to lead the sales and marketing division of a hyper-growth startup.
Yeah, so that's actually a very personal story, personal journey. I grew up in Boston, from the Boston area. After I graduated from UMass Amherst, I started working for a venture capital firm in Boston called OpenV Partners. Really, they've done some really great things since then. When I joined, the firm was actually pretty new. And while I was there, I was on the OpenV Labs team, which is their go-to-market consulting team that works with the portfolio companies to help them implement best practices. And we were investing in early stage B2B tech companies. It was sort of, as SaaS was becoming the next thing, all the new startups at that time were pretty much SaaS companies. And so I was helping them implement best practices. And as part of that, best practices and go-to-market, as part of that, I actually became a certified Salesforce admin in 2008. And I mean, basically what we realized pretty early on is that most companies we were invested in either didn't have a proper CRM system or were using Salesforce and didn't have it implemented correctly, and they just didn't have processes that could scale. They didn't have systems that could scale. And so that was actually a big part of my job, in addition to sort of go-to-market strategy consulting. And so I did that for a while. I spent two years during that time actually with a company called Intronis, which was a online backup company that we invested in. That was Sam Gutman, the CEO of OwnBackup. That was his company. So that's how he and I first met. And so during that time, I learned a lot about building early stage technology companies. I learned a lot about the Salesforce.com and the Salesforce ecosystem. And I learned a lot about backup and recovery because of the time I spent working with Sam at Intronis. And, years later, during that time, I ended up meeting a very nice Israeli girl who is now my wife. She decided at some point that we were going to move to Israel. So we took some time off on the way, and then we moved to Israel. And when I got here, I was, starting from scratch essentially, and I had to decide what I wanted to do. So I basically decided that there was two routes I was going to take. I was either going to go work for another VC firm based here in Israel, or I was going to go find some smart Israeli entrepreneurs to team up with and start a company. And so I actually, that period here, when I was interviewing with companies and meeting with entrepreneurs was actually a super fun time because I got to meet so many incredibly smart people, that many of which I still keep in touch with today. And that was how I met Ariel Berkman, our CTO. And so he and I met, and the full story is, he and I were introduced. We scheduled a meeting, and then about a week before the meeting, I got an email from Sam who said, "Hey, Ori, I heard you live in Israel now. I'm coming on vacation with my family, and I'd love to meet up. Any interesting companies I should meet with while I'm there? I'm looking for my next thing." And I said, "Well, hey, Sam, I'm going to meet with these guys. They do backup for Salesforce. It's right up our alley. Why don't you just come join me?" So he took a few hours off of his vacation, and we ended up all meeting together at a coffee shop in Herzliya.
Wow.
And then, yeah.
And when was this?
So that was in the fall of 2014. I think that was October of 2014. And, we did a bit of negotiation and due diligence and stuff. And I guess the way I thought about it was, any startup that I would want to join should be a startup that I would invest in. Because at the end of the day, when you join a startup, you're investing so much more than money uh, uh, into
Of
it.
course.
And so that was really how I thought about it. So we did our due diligence. I spoke with a lot of my contacts from Boston, from the Salesforce ecosystem, and the story made a lot of sense. The product was great. It was, right product in the right place at the right time. And, we just had to execute.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about your thought process as you're deciding, where you want to be focusing a lot of your time. You've been there for more than 6 years now. So obviously the due diligence ended up with you choosing to invest your time and a big part of your life into this. What were some of the things that made you decide this is the right thing for me to do on a personal level?
That's a good question. I think, there's only so many, I guess, stages in life where you can make that, take that leap of faith. I mean, especially at that stage in my life, I wasn't, I couldn't exactly retire at that point in my life. So it was a risk. And, there's only so many times in life where you can put yourself in that type of situation and go head on, and you're either gonna hit it and knock it out of the park, or you're gonna, fizzle out and go back to a more of a normal lifestyle than an entrepreneurial lifestyle. So I was, lucky enough to be in that situation, and I felt it was, the right. If I wasn't going to do it then, I don't know if I ever would have done. So
Amazing.
that was one of the factors.
And so you're joining OwnBackup, and walk me through some of your understanding of, what is your job going to entail, and how perhaps that evolved, over these past 6 years, because I'm sure your job has evolved tremendously as the company grew and as you grew your team from 1 to 200. What was that growth like, and how did you personally deal with that? Holding both yourself accountable, but also understanding that the job description that you thought you're taking on is actually changing pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's true. I mean, I have to say, it didn't initially. It didn't. I wasn't surprised. I sort of knew what I was getting myself into because I'd been around that. But I think I was pretty lucky in the sense that, we joined when Sam and I joined. Ariel was sort of the technical founder. Sam is a business guy. Um, he's very well rounded, and I was really focused on go to market. So a lot of founders don't have that luxury. They have to be doing a little bit of everything. And so joining as like a sales oriented founder, or a sales founder, is kind of unique, I think. So I was at first really just focused on go to market. I was writing blogs for the website. I was writing content for the website. I was cold calling customers. I was responding to inbound leads. And because of my background in Salesforce, I actually maintained my admin certifications for a while. I could actually talk shop with our customers. I could have very deep technical conversations with our customers. And so I was doing tech support calls, and of course, Ariel was, I would have the customer in one ear and Ariel in the other ear, and he's, typing things into his, matrix in his computer, helping troubleshoot stuff. But, at first I wore pretty much any customer facing hat, for the first almost year.
Wow.
I hired our first couple of salespeople in in August or September of 2015, and the first salesperson I hired was Emma Van Degna. She actually leads our enterprise team today, and she and I actually had worked together at OpenView, so we had stayed in touch, and I always saw her as a really good salesperson. So she was one of the first people I brought on board. She's still here today. She's leading our enterprise team, doing a fantastic job. But once she came on, then I continued. She focused on the U.S. market. I hired her she was working out of Boston at the time. She focused on the U.S. market. I continued to focus on the European market. But then I was also her sales engineer. So I was still wearing all the different hats. And then slowly, we grew the team from there. I think we got our first, we did our first sort of mini sales boot camp in 2016 when we hired a group of about, I think it was 4 or 5 additional sales reps and 2 new SDRs. And we flew everyone out to New Jersey, where our office was, which at the time we were working out of Sam's dad's company's office, which was fun. So we all got together in the conference room there, and we ran our first sort of sales boot camp, which was great. And then it was more.
Ori, I have to say that just from that short description, I can't, I can assume already just by hearing you that you really remember that day, and you really remember that boot camp and what it was like. And a part of me also believes that that's probably not necessarily the case for every boot camp you ran, in every meeting or it sounds like this was a pretty big thing that in your own journey, this boot camp, right? This learning experience.
I think it was a good, it was the first time we had a sales team, really.
Wow.
So that was cool.
And what did you learn from onboarding these 4 or 5 new sales reps and the SDRs? And because I'm almost trying to, make it as a similar analogy to, growing a product as a company, that you're building the product, you're finding product market fit. The test for that is sort of this bootcamp and this onboarding. And once you find that, you're entering a growth stage where you go, okay, now we're 10 and now we're going to get to 200. And you sort of iterate on this process. But that first big client, or that first big breakthrough, like bring on board the first few people, that's really the big learning experience, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's very similar to the work that I did at OpenView. So it wasn't that foreign to me. It was definitely an amazing experience, but a lot of it was, just taking a page straight out of the textbook that I used when I worked with many of our portfolio companies then. So it was familiar, but it's different. I mean, it's different when you're a consultant or an investor than when you're,
right.
A founder of the company, and you have a lot more skin in the game, and you have, you're personally invested. So that was a great feeling.
Amazing. And so the growth then 20x really from that point. What is that like? I mean, I obviously I can't even attempt trying to get you to answer that within a few minutes, but take me through some of the non-trivial things that you learned that perhaps I, as a young entrepreneur, aren't even thinking about when I'm trying to picture what growing an organization like that is.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one thing.
Right.
But there's a lot. I'd say there's a few things that are really important to keep in mind for young entrepreneurs. First of all, I think most entrepreneurs think they have product market fit way before they actually do. So you don't necessarily have to rush to hire your first sales team. It's actually really good to stay close to the customers for a little while. And one of the reasons I hired my first few reps in the U.S. Was so that I could continue to focus on EMEA. And then we actually did hire. You know, we considered not hiring people in EMEA or in Israel. I was based in Israel at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Considered not hiring people in Israel at all. But I actually insisted on hiring at least one salesperson here that I could stay close to, and that was also really helpful.
Wow.
But as you bring on the team and as you hire people, the things that are really important to keep in mind are, making sure you have really clear definitions around who's your ideal customer and who is your buyer persona, and like really who are those people and what do they care about, what do they think about, and what's their day-to-day language, and making sure that your team picks that up is super important. And that should feed into almost everything. That should feed into the people you hire. Like you want to hire your first few people from that, maybe from that ecosystem, maybe from a customer, maybe from people who really understand the problem. That is also another thing that's really important, I think, for early entrepreneurs, is that the first few people you hire are, actually everybody you hire makes an impact, for
Right.
better or worse. So, that's another thing. I think it's most entrepreneurs, I don't know if it's most, but I think you're better off hiring slowly and hiring great people than rushing to hit some hiring goal and ending up with a bunch of, not great talent or people who aren't really going to be good for your culture as you grow.
Right. And I'm actually hearing that quite often, that there's a lot of pressure sometimes that you're supposed to be growing at a certain speed and you've raised a certain amount of capital and the market is responding in a certain way, and then you're sometimes compromising perhaps on your hiring habits and your due diligence on the right people, which at the end might compromise culture. Now, from your experience, how critical is it to do that diligence on the 200th person, in comparison to some of the first few? Maybe at some point, as you get to the hundreds, maybe you can then fall through the cracks at some points and just know to fire fast. And so you don't really have to worry too much about that. Is that what you found, or did you find something else?
I think you have to do both. I don't think you can ever just say, we can settle.
Right.
You should never settle. Even when you're a 50,000 person company, you shouldn't be settling on talent.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always, of course, it depends on the role. Some roles you might do more due diligence, and some roles you
Right.
might do less. But you should always have high expectations for the people you're bringing on, because they're the people who are going to make the difference, build the company, build the culture, or ruin it.
Amazing. Ori, there's a lot more questions that I want to ask, and we're just touching this. We're just starting to scratch the surface on a lot of the questions about growth. But I loved hearing your personal story and the founding story, and I think that perspective also sometimes gets lost in the hype and the fame and the big numbers. But at the end, it's we're all people, and we all have these amazing experiences and a lot of difficult decisions to make. And I think as a young entrepreneur, that's what grounds me in this show, is hearing at the end how things started and how it was not trivial and it wasn't obvious, and it's not an overnight success. In this case, it's over 6 years success, which is a long time comparison to what a lot of people think. And so thank you for the time. I have a few more questions about you, not about OwnBackup or about this specific journey. And I want to take you back to middle school or high school. What was your favorite subject? What fascinated you as a kid?
Um, I was, so I think my favorite subject in middle school was probably history in
History.
retrospect. Yeah, I really
Okay.
enjoyed history.
All right.
And um, I was also very interested in film. I did a summer program at the New York Film Academy and
Wow.
did a lot of
Amazing.
home movies with my friends. But yeah,
Very, very cool. And an inspiration. Anybody, on your journey, personal or professional, that serves as some sort of role model or some figure of inspiration?
yeah, I think I draw inspiration from a lot of different sources. You know, even in tech, I look up to other very successful tech entrepreneurs like Mark Benioff and even Bill Gates was someone I even looked up to as a kid. So seeing
Wow.
what they do today, and they're both on the business side and also on the philanthropic side, and
Yeah.
how they actually you know uh,
Incredible.
put actions behind their words.
Very, very cool. And what are three words that you would use to describe yourself if I were to ask you?
Three words I'd use to describe myself. I think curious, um, uh, uh, action, and energetic.
Yeah.
I like doing stuff. I like going out and doing stuff, and then motivated.
Very, very cool. Ori, thank
Yeah.
you very, very much. Continue making a huge impact with OwnBackup, and I'll still continue to think through what it's like to grow an organization from 1 to 200 and globally with all its challenges. Thank you for the inspiration and thank you for your time. Take care.
Yeah. My pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
Bye bye.